Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimist, where we talk about all things film, usually with optimism, but today we are actually in mourning of
Yeah.
David Lynch, um, one of my favorite filmmakers, someone we've discussed on the podcast before, who died January 15th, just a few days ago of us recording this. And we're going to try and keep this upbeat. We're going to try and talk about one of his movies that we have not discussed yet, Blue Velvet. But I'm going to be honest with you folks, it's going to get a little grim because this man meant a lot to me. So I am your co-host, Seth Boyd.
I am Megan Tierney.
And sorry, did we already do that?
No, but I like it. I
Okay,
love the
okay,
way that you just jumped right into
perfect.
that, Seth,
Okay.
because I can feel the grandiosity of this artist on
Yeah,
your. So sorry for your loss. Sorry for our
thank
communal
you.
artisanal loss. And I should thank you for bringing this man into your life once again. I haven't seen the movie that we were going to discuss today, but I am happy to do it. Because it is. I do have a lot to say, and like
Yes.
you can recognize how impactful this
Yeah,
true artist is. So really excited to talk to you about it.
fantastic. And yeah, I think I don't act like I have ownership over David Lynch. Fans kind of do that, but there's a lot of things that made him very, very unique. And obviously, he maybe more than any other director created truly his own world for every movie. The man did a Disney movie, like a good one, that still had his strange otherworldliness that is very grounded, but is also very much a David Lynch movie. This is the straight story. He did a
Oh.
historical biopic, kind of. He did The Elephant Man. He did the first
Mhm.
version of Dune, and of course did these really captivating, otherworldly things like Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway. Um, and I just want to say real quick that it is a great loss. He was one of our greatest filmmakers, such an important artist. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. As a trauma victim,
Mhm.
I felt like he empathized with us so much. So
Mm.
much of his work is about pain, it's about trauma. And something that I find so much comfort in is this otherworldliness that he deals with, these really surreal films, because there isn't a logic to the pain that he's describing. And the feelings you have as someone who's been wronged, likewise, are so confused and they're so hurt. And I think
Mhm.
the surrealist way that he deals with them feels a lot more true to me than a straightforward account of trauma. And
Mm.
so I really resonated with his movies, particularly without we're going to talk about Mulholland Drive and all of Twin Peaks. I loved all his movies.
Mhm.
Um, but I think some people feel particularly seen by that. There's a lot of different things people take away from them, but that's certainly one of them was I felt like he understood it and wanted to let us know we were seeing so. I wanted to thank him for that. And because we always talk state of the world with film as well,
Mhm.
I'm very, very frustrated that I now I can say his name, the man running Netflix right now released some statement about, oh, we were going to work together. And this is really offensive to me because Netflix turned down several projects by David Lynch before he died, like for
Wow.
years. Like they had a deal that after Twin Peaks The Return, the third season came out in 2017.
Mhm.
We heard headline after headline of Netflix and David Lynch are finally doing something together, and they just kept turning stuff down. There's going to be an animated movie, there's going to be another TV show. Um, there was at least 2 to 3 projects that they turned down, and now that the man has passed, they're saying, "Oh, it was just COVID complications and state and stuff. It was going to happen." It's like, no, they rejected it outright.
I was gonna
And
say that sorry to cut you off, but that
yeah, of
is
course,
so specific to like Netflix is
yeah,
the be all end all platform that literally whoever the hell can get get on. So
yeah,
that is so pointed and so like bad taste in your mouth, basically.
yes, and they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on big dumb action movies, and those Zack Snyder Rebel Moon things, and
Just look insane.
yeah, stuff that like is doing critically really horrible, but they're costing hundreds of millions, and they're
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's actually watching. Maybe they are, and I'm the asshole. But I'm just like, it is really grim to me that we lost such a true. Not only that we lost this voice, this incredible creative genius, but we're also getting further and further away from someone like him being able to exist. And
Yeah.
we'll do our top scene in 2024 episode next, so
Hmm.
that will be a little optimistic. But this one hit me hard, folks. So I'm in a mood. Okay,
Well, thank you for sharing all that. So
of course.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Like it's so nice to just feel seen, or like, and it's not even
Hmm.
about like me, I feel seen, but like that's a very specific like to film for me in general is
Yeah,
like that's what that kind of does and it helps you explore and work through and I didn't know about the Netflix thing. That's very interesting and is
yeah.
really upsetting. I understand you're upset there. That's pretty crazy.
Thank you. So yeah, I think a lot of people can appreciate a lot of different things about him, but that's one in particular that I am resonate with fellow fans of. This is verging on a full-on spoiler for a TV show that's been over for a long time, but Twin Peaks is largely about domestic abuse and
Uh-huh.
kind of at its core. And so that really, as a victim of domestic abuse, really hits home, and it's a better uh, depiction of that than anything else they've ever seen. And
Okay.
um, so, folks, if you haven't checked out why they consider one of the greatest TV shows of all time, check it out. It's very
Yeah.
good.
So actually
And
Twin Peaks was the one show that I had seen. That was
okay, I
like
was pretty sure you'd seen like some of
that
it,
was
right?
our film because it's also like any film
Yeah,
kid in college you have to watch David Lynch and
right.
I understand why now, but Twin Peaks was ours and I remember really enjoying it.
Good.
And I was going to ask you, Seth, I should have like rewatched our Memento episode, or I'm sorry, our Mulholland Drive episode,
Sure.
because I forget if we had talked about if you prefer Blue Velvet over that, and I think the answer was yes, but am I right in that?
They're very closely tied. They're very
Yeah.
closely. I think like Twin Peaks as a whole, that includes like the third season and Fire Walk with Me, the movie. Like the whole
Hmm.
package is maybe my favorite, but like I I I I'm probably gonna rewatch every David Lynch thing the next month. I'm gonna take my time
Good.
with it, and I we're doing this episode. Like I text you saying, "Do you mind if I do this?" While I was in the middle of rewatching Blue Velvet, then I watched Mulholland Drive the next day.
Oh,
So, but
good.
they
That's
are,
nice.
but let's get into it, folks. Enough about my morning. Megan, before we go into what this movie is, initial thoughts on a first time viewer, and maybe you had a little bit of idea of what you were getting into just having seen Mulholland Drive before. Of
Hmm.
it was not going to be a normal movie. So
Fair. Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't. I so part of my COVID experience, or just
sure,
maybe it's I can't even blame it on COVID these days. Honestly, I
yeah,
can't remember movies. I can't remember
okay,
anything that I consume like pretty well. So it's great. Everything's brand new to me, brand new.
fantastic, yeah,
But I do. I mean, of course, I do remember Mulholland Drive, like in its overall feel. That's why I was like, I do wish I'd
yeah,
like revisited what we talked about, but I think I'm going to kind of
yeah,
say the same thing because from what I remember, it's just that David Lynch has like such a very specific feel to his
yeah,
movies. This one felt from what I remember a lot like how I kind of felt watching Mulholland Drive. They're different movies, but there's just so many like hyper specific things that I think are akin to him and like true to his I guess style, but
hmm,
just true to like how he makes film is what I was trying to like get at. And I think it was like in this one there was many things, but I think like um I did think it was like a little less surreal than
yes,
Mulholland Drive. I mean, yeah, naturally, but his scripts are also just so strange in
hmm,
like the best way possible and like
yeah,
you will never like I think it made me think of like that it is so stylized. I think now there's a big push for like realism in
hmm,
script, like or as much as you can, and like especially people trying to relate. And I loved that this is a very there's like a hyperbole to his script. There's a parody aspect
yeah,
that I really really like,
yeah,
especially in this one. That I
hmm,
found it strangely comedic, which I'm excited to
yes,
talk to you about. Okay, that's great. So yeah, there's all of those things were like the essence, I guess, of what I remember from Mulholland Drive, and I think it. I think that I liked Mulholland Drive a little better from what I
sure.
remember. Just
I think that's fair. Yeah.
overall,
I think Mulholland
everything
Drive is frankly a better movie, but I really like both of them. So,
yes,
yeah.
that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, that was my overall like at least essence of
Yeah.
Lynch that very hardcore came back in this movie, which was
Perfect. So you
nice.
liked it though?
I did like it.
Good, good,
I
good.
did like it.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot.
yes.
There's a lot going
Yeah,
on.
there's quite a bit of idea. And I think the the particularly strange thing about Blue Velvet, especially if you've already seen, say, Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway or something, is that this is a linear movie and everything in it actually happens. Whereas so many other David
Hmm.
Lynch movies, you're kind of debating, well, what was the dream? What really happened?
Yeah.
Everything there's some short dream sequences that are very obviously dream sequences, but every insane thing you see in this movie is real in
Yep.
terms of the movie. It's not you're never thinking, well, did Jeffrey Beaumont dream that? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
no every bizarre, crazy, Dennis Hopper huffing from the gas mask,
Uh-huh.
all that's real. Um, so we're going to talk about what this movie is in a second, but I'm glad you mentioned the comedic part because like I think we talked about that a little bit more on Travis. David Lynch is funny,
Yeah.
and sometimes with these art house directors, the same with like Werner Herzog. Werner Herzog's funny, and
Hmm.
I think Lynch is often very, very leading into parody. The weird thing
Yes.
that gets people kind of confused is sometimes there's a scene that is a parody, but also has an element of sincerity that can get confusing
Hmm.
um and so there are people who say that there's never anything ironic in a Lynch movie, and that's kind of like a debatable thing to say because like there's so many of his things are founded in parody, and like Twin Peaks is literally a parody of soap operas, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so there's a lot of parody scenes, especially when you get into really clear um iconography. You're having a very Norman Rockwell town, right? This
Yes.
movie is set in is contemporary. It's 1986, but it's such a small town America. Lumberton. They never say what state it is, but I think this is actually the real name of a town in North Carolina where they shot this.
Mm,
And
okay.
but like it is such a small town that it might as well be the 50s, and so
Hmm.
many things are the 50s, maybe late 60s with some of the music. One of the biggest reminders that you're in the 80s is that the main character, Kyle MacLachlan, has an earring. And it's something that
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
I know people who've seen the movie several times and are startled when they notice it. And then you have some synth stuff a little bit later, but like his just Kyle MacLachlan's outfit is kind of 50s, 60s uh attire, but it also is kind of new wave band,
I was
in
gonna.
the 80s.
Uh-huh.
So right, and his
Well, even
haircut.
set design too is like almost
Yeah,
postmodern for some of the
right.
druggy like crazy
Yeah.
scenes.
Absolutely. So sorry, we're getting a little into the weeds. So let me back up a little bit. I think an important context before we get into this movie, there's several reasons why this movie is really significant in Lynch's career. While he had
Mm,
already worked with Kyle MacLachlan, who was one of his major returning to stars, he worked with him on Dune, which bombed. We talked a little bit about that in our Dune episode. I'm an apologist for it, but still,
mm,
it was a commercial and financial flop. And so he decided to do a much smaller personal movie after that, and he ended up being Blue Velvet. This is the only movie David Lynch has confirmed is in any way autobiographical. There's obviously people who
mm,
study him who have a lot of theories about different things, but he's open about several things in this movie actually happened to him, um,
mm.
including one of the most upsetting scenes we'll talk about later.
Oh,
But
okay.
so this is a small town movie. It's him working with Kyle MacLachlan again, and they're really jiving now, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
parallels between the later work they did. Laura Dern is this is the first time they worked together, and she's a huge actress in a lot of David Lynch projects. Isabella Rossellini,
Mm.
Ingrid Bergman's daughter, if you didn't know, Megan.
Oh
We've talked about
wow,
before.
I did not
Yeah,
know that.
and yeah, so she's nominated for an Oscar
Oh,
in Conclave, which was really good. So, still a
oh
great
cool.
actress. Her and David Lynch were married for a while. She was also married to Martin Scorsese for a little bit. So you
Oh.
have a lot of people coming into this that he works with a lot, including Angelo Badalamenti, who's the composer. So it was
Hmm.
a very big critical hit and commercial. It was a cheap movie, but it was definitely like anybody who thought this David Lynch guy lost his way after Eraserhead and Elephant Man was fully back in. Uh,
Hmm.
for the most part, Roger Ebert hated this and didn't really like another movie till Mulholland Drive.
Well,
But most of America, most of Hollywood was okay. Our man's back, and so that's why it's
they were
very
happy.
important. It also coincided like there was a lot of significant people in terms of what art was going to be for the next couple decades who saw this movie in grad school, and one of the most famous is David Foster Wallace, who talks about it a lot in
Oh
his
wow.
writings, before writing Infinite Jest, and some famous photographers. And so a lot of people are seeing this movie. You mentioned postmodern. It's a very postmodern movie in a lot of ways. And it's maybe the most
Mm.
aggressive he is with form,
Ah.
because there's moments in this movie where the characters are looking directly at the camera,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
there's no subtext to this movie. Like there's Dennis Hopper, our crazy villain, at one point looks into the camera and says, "Don't you fucking look at me." you
Oh
know?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's definitely kind of Lynch being mad in this movie that I think you feel.
Yeah.
That you might feel a little bit in Mulholland Drive too, of being frustrated by failed projects. Um, and so I think his form is the most aggressive in this.
Yeah.
Um, what the plot actually is, though, is a man, Kyle MacLachlan, who's playing Jeffrey Beaumont, has to come home from college because his father has a stroke, and
Mm-hmm.
basically uncovers a very strange, seedy underworld when he passes by a field and comes across a severed ear. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but before we get into those deeper details, Megan, what did you think of this? Literally the opening scene, because I think it really sets up what you're in for, unlike a
It's
lot
so
of other
true.
movies.
I think really like also quickly like really
Mm-hmm.
importantly to me the normie aspect of like Jeffrey Bromont as a whole kind of is it's set up
Sure.
really well like kind of from the beginning. His father aspect is kind of a dark the only it's kind of hard to describe because it's like it's his only darkness, I guess,
Mm.
but his sing-songy like wide-eyed persona
Yeah.
is so like really important to me and of course like adds to the parody element, but
Yeah.
um I just can't get over like how much I really enjoyed this parody. And I agree with what you were saying too. Like it is a little more
Yeah.
I do think it's subtle. Like it's not like it's not an obvious strictly
Right.
concrete parody, and I just love that
Yeah.
about it. And the ear too. Like um I think there's a lot of like what I thought it was, and maybe or tell me how you feel too. But it was a
Sure.
thing
Go ahead.
of like at least a reference to hear no evil, see no evil, speak no
Sure.
evil. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I
So
think so.
that
Yeah.
was really fun. But yeah, I just love
Well,
I can't handle how great of a setup this sing like the wide-eyed like I say like sing-songy world
mhm.
to what it becomes is just so perfect. I just love it.
Yeah, we have the titular song Blue the Barbie Vent of this playing of the credits
Hmm.
of kind of slow motion, small town. Like you literally have the fire truck going by with a fireman waving, and you
Yeah.
have the white picket fence, and then you have a man watering his lawn, and then he has a stroke, and it's funny. And then you
Yeah,
have
so
like the dog
it
freaking
is
out, which is pretty
funny.
funny. The
Yep.
music starts to get a little grimmer, and then we go under the grass, and then we're just hanging out. We get real extreme zooms in on like the insects, especially the bugs, the beetles,
Hmm.
the underbelly. And so in many ways, this movie is not subtle at all. Like we are going to go
Yeah.
here. Everyone else thinks this is what's happening. We're going to the literal
Yeah.
underbelly here with
Yes.
the filth, and that's where most of the movie is going to take place, and the juxtaposition of it. I do want to interject here real quick too. I think one of the reasons this movie resonates with a lot of people, if especially if you're from the suburbs of your small town. Like I'm not from like a really small town. It was
Uh-huh.
20 minutes to get to San Francisco.
Right.
But I think there was always this kind of sense that I had, and I think a lot of people have like there's something more complicated going around. And I think people who watch this movie, especially like their late teens, early 20s, have this kind of like aha moment in watching this of realizing,
Hmm.
okay, I'm right that the world is not not that it's like exactly different than what my parents told me, but it's definitely stranger. And I think it's a good movie to prepare you for that.
Yeah.
There is a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit of the world's not I'm not going to the job market that my parents had or whatever. But this movie is on oddly comforting of because it is also there's kind of two genres at play here as well as a neo-noir and a coming of age story of all things, which I don't really think
Hmm.
of, but it definitely is a man in his early 20s coming of age, realizing how fucked up the world is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not in the usual way, in
Yeah.
so much stranger things happening than most people will ever encounter kind of way.
And what a hard thing to make funny, but that is
Yeah,
it's Like it's almost like I thought of like the if you say the plot of like just this normie kid gets sucked into the seedy underworld, that sounds
Right.
like a comedy plot, or like
Hmm.
it could have been such
Yeah.
a weird like it could have been just a weird like kind of zany movie, and it's
Right.
very sincere obviously, and but like I just thought how I don't know how like it is like very pointed in its
Hmm.
critiques as well,
Right.
which I appreciated about it too, because it does it gets it in terms of like we're saying it gets into a dark world, it gets into to the craziest most dark world you could ever imagine, like
Yes.
literally everything could go
Yeah.
wrong. And but it is still I think just the womp womp of
Right.
like understanding of coming into adulthood is funny. Like it is funnily done.
Right. No, I think you're right. There's a lot of weird. I mean, and part of the kind of I think parody of 50s aspect stuff is too like he pretty quickly starts being the other guy to a slightly younger woman. Like he's maybe I said 20, he's maybe 18 because I think he's like just in
Yeah, I mean,
college, and he's
right,
dating
right.
pretty quickly seeing the cop's daughter because he when he finds a celebrity, he goes to the police
Yep.
chief that he remembers and his very attractive young daughter is Laura Dern, who's like, "Hey, I know my dad
Mhm,
won't tell you about it, but here's what I know just from
mhm.
overhearing." And so now that you have these two kind of crazy kids that caught up in the mystery, and of all people, who shouldn't it be the policeman's daughter?
Yeah.
And of course, she already has the jock boyfriend, and so you
Oh
have
yeah. Hmm.
stuff that just really feels like a '50s high school movie, or like
Hmm.
a parody of that, like Grease or something, kind of happening
It does.
pretty quickly. And it's kind of
Yep.
hard to ignore, but it's also like um, it's not inappropriate to the story at all, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think there's definitely people who just kind of watch this movie, think, oh, that was funny and sick, and don't actually have an emotional connection to it. And like,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I just definitely do. So,
Yeah. That's fine. Hmm.
yeah.
Well, and
Um,
he's even driving around the hot rod, and like it
oh
was
yeah,
almost it was hard to place. Like it really was hard
right.
to place them in time. I think the girls are wearing like 50s dresses and like
She's
that
almost wearing
was
like bobby socks. And
yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're right, all the cars look like 50s cars.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of like 50s like Roy Orbison is a huge component of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's It's a pivotal thing. And
They
so
they're going to diners and everything like that. Like it's
right,
all the iconography basically, like you say, like literally
exactly.
like Grease. Grease is a
Right.
great comparison of it.
And so I think we'll just kind of, rather than go scene by scene, get into the real weird crux of what happens is Jeffrey Camelconkin eventually finds out that um, the year belongs to a man who's been kidnapped and a boy who's been kidnapped, who is the husband and son of Isabella Orsolini, who was a singer that this local gangster, Frank Booth, played by Dennis
Yep.
Hopper, is obsessed with and is kind of keeping as, I shouldn't say kind, is keeping as this very strange sexual slave. And I say strange because it's
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing is very odd. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a role play component to it. There's a BDSM and very strange stuff. And it's part of what makes this movie so disturbing. It's not
Uh-huh.
a normal sex act that he's interested in. It's
Mm-hmm.
very strange. It's very bizarre. It's very threatening. And that's just one of those things that I think you only kind of have to see to understand. Like, I don't even know what it
Mm-hmm.
says in the script. I think this is the thing, even
That's
though
true.
I've thought about this a few times, is watching the scene, like, what did he write down? Um, I do want to take this moment to stop and say one thing that I also love about David Lynch is everyone loved working with him. Everyone who gave their,
Oh,
in memoriam talked about how kind he was. And I think
good.
particularly of note was all the women who talked about even these very intense, uncomfortable scenes. They always felt so safe and like such professionals collaborating with a trusted person
Oh,
in these
yeah.
scenes. And there's so many lawsuits happening right now about actors, directors, taking advantage. Sure, they're always men with women of you
Yes.
know, I didn't want to film that scene. I don't want to get into too many of the details, but there's a lot of those happening literally right now. And so it's very comforting to remember that this guy could shoot something very uncomfortable without manipulation. He was very open about just hating the idea of controlling through fear, and knowing a lot of directors do it.
Wow.
And it's like, it's so stupid. And another thing we lost with it. So,
I was
um,
I was gonna say reassuring to hear. It's sad that it is reassuring, but that is extremely
yes,
reassuring to hear. And like I'll maybe even rare is a way to
I would
say
say
it.
so. I
Yeah.
mean, the man was directing from the 50s until very recently, decades. Sorry, not the 50s, the 70s.
Mm,
And, so many, you think about how many directors came and went in that time and how many people he was aware of
uh-huh.
and who's aware of what they were doing and just, it's like, no, I'm not doing that. And
Yeah.
there's so many examples like Hitchcock and Kubrick, and there's just lesser known people who never become
Hmm.
that famous who were just used to doing shitty things. Even not even like the filming the scenes, as people talked about, is like the audition. We didn't even actually audition. We just chatted the whole time, and it was the first time I
Hmm.
felt like Naomi Watts talks about. It's the first time I felt like I was seen by another person in Hollywood after
Oh,
years and years of trying to break through. So
yeah.
that's not for nothing. I think that's one of the reasons people really resonate with it too. I think you can kind of see the collaboration and the connection he has
Yeah.
with a ever growing cast of recurrent actors.
Hmm. And it is, I mean, I think also we might want to warn and specify that it is like
Yeah,
pretty quite intense, like
it
I
is very
say,
intense. Yeah, this is a trigger warning movie for
abuse all
sure.
around. Yeah,
Yeah,
which Seth kindly gave me. Anyway, it's fine, it's
yeah,
fine by it. It was but even it's just it is so wild. Like
yeah.
what's his name's character? Dennis Hopper's Frank's
Desktop for Frank
character
Booth. Yeah,
is like you can he's cartoonishly evil
he
and
is.
like his band of goons is cartoonish
I actually love his
like
band of
as
goons
well.
there, and it's sorry, but you're right. Like I was just rewatching this. Like, how do you become one of Frank's goons? You know,
Yeah.
like what's
Yeah,
going on in
really.
this town? They're like, I'm following this guy who's constantly crying whenever and demanding we play his favorite song,
Like to me like
and
Looney Tunes Goonie like
oh
that
yeah,
level, but they're still so in like insanely awful horrendous abuse going on,
yeah.
but
It's
like
they're always. It's generally very frightening. It is
right, right.
like the threat is very real, and this is a very sexual movie, and it gets into um like right before we even know that Dennis Hopper's character exists. There's like the famous voyeur scene that's
Uh-huh.
often compared to Rear Window of Jeffrey's trying to snoop and find information, ends up having to hide in the closet.
Yes.
They end up having a strange interaction
Yeah.
that she's holding a knife. It's very sexual, and they end up actually having a sexual relationship that's consensual for a while in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's very strange, where she's dealing with her demons through it. And so it's another weird thing about this
Mm-hmm.
is our hero who is,
Yeah.
you know, doing this, but also genuinely wants to help, but is also exploring himself. And so this is a much
Yes.
darker, weirder thing. I don't actually really judge him because he's definitely, again, with it being a coming of age thing, he's figuring out his whole deal on life and
Oh,
everything.
right.
And I think Laura Dern's character kind of understands that as well. I'm not endorsing this, but I'm just saying I think that's another unique thing about this movie is um the characters have an odd amount of empathy with each other of the strangely strange thing they're going through.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I mean, at first he's just trying to stay alive almost, but
yeah, yeah,
like literally. But I agree. Like he has a breakdown scene too, where
hmm
it's kind of later in, and
yeah,
he has. I'll say like the breakdown scene was pretty like cathartic. I thought a
yeah.
really
I
like
agree.
cathartic moment because it could have been such a different movie if he kind of is also getting like obviously not as insane as Frank because nobody could be as as
Right.
insane as Frank and his goons, as we
hmm
say, but like that he is also benefiting from this extra like this hot basically hostage held woman
Yes.
um
Yeah.
sexually and like and getting what he kind of he gets the exploration aspect out of it that he
Right.
is good to him and still we can see that it's crazy and awful for I don't remember her name. So for Dorothy, for the
Dorothy.
singer.
Yes. Yeah.
So I thought I was like when it happened, it was very sincere. Like he
Yeah.
really and it kind of hangs on him for at least a good like 20 seconds or so of him like truly crying and breaking down
Yeah.
about the craziness of a situation. And I thought this is like I think that was very important and an important like moral aspect of the movie
I
for
think
this
that
character specifically.
I think you're right. I think that's another great point. Like we're it's so rare to see like a man crying in a movie and he's the hero.
Yeah,
You know, I think that's
true.
a really interesting thing about him. Um,
Honestly.
so it is any important moment that we have this breakdown, this confrontation. So I do want to go back and talk
Hmm.
about Frank because I find him to be a very extreme kind of in that, broadly speaking here, that Richard the Third canon of threatening but
Mm.
funny. And
Uh-huh.
like the Joker, whatever. It's obviously it goes much back to like Italian theater, like a natural name of the trope. But this absolute villain who is truly a threat and is truly frightening, and we should
Mhm.
emphasize among the most Lynchian things about this is the way these scenes are shot. Him having his strange way with Isabella Rossellini is often in these Lynchian bizarre sound designs and like slow motion that look like Francis Bacon paintings. That it looks
Yeah.
he looks so monstrous during it, and it's even though what's happening is not something where narcissism, it's not a full-on penetration, but I think it's so bizarre, and then the way
Yeah.
it's shot is so bizarre that it feels in one way a little bit more respectful, but also highlights again the strangeness of it in a way that I
Hmm.
think is true. I think it
Uh-huh.
very accurately depicts without it being again. There's a one of the Italian surrealist filmmakers, Antino, Michelangelo Antonioni, sorry, said that if we need to preserve film, in order to preserve film, we need to separate truth from reality. And I think that's very true in surrealism. We need to depict the trueness of this pain, of this emotion,
Hmm.
by not depicting it literally. And I think that's what this movie and all Lynch movies do a lot is we're depicting the emotion here by
Mm.
heightening it and by distorting it in a way that feels maybe more real. And especially when we're thinking about it's Jeffrey's point of view watching this. And this is so
Yeah.
unlike anything a 18 to 20-year old who only knows this small town
Right.
and some university again is not encountering anything like this, as I was saying. So,
Hmm.
but did you find also, are you familiar with Dennis Hopper and something outside of this? Because this is one of those, like, this is one of his most famous roles. I'm glad I knew him in Hoosiers before watching this, where he plays just kind of a
Okay.
pathetic drunk. For whatever reason, I grew up watching that movie, and so for me, it's like,
Hmm.
holy shit, Dennis Hopper is
My
going
hero.
nuts in this movie. Yeah, exactly.
He was the face and like his kind of his voice, I guess,
Yeah,
was very familiar, but I can't recall any. I don't know for sure. Like I couldn't
sure,
say I didn't. I wasn't like, oh, I know that guy.
fair enough. Yeah, yeah,
He was very very in his character in
yeah.
this movie for you to kind of focus on anything else really, but yeah, he was familiar. I just couldn't quite place it.
I mean, he's another guy who's been acting since the 50s. Like he was in James Dean
Mm.
movies and
Oh
on.
wow,
So, like, yeah, they were friends, and like he's
that's
literally
funny.
in Rebel Without a Cause. So, um,
Then maybe it was that, honestly.
yeah, it could
Honestly.
be right.
Yeah.
But was he funny to you? Was he frightening? Was he both? Was he? What
Oh,
was he to you?
agreed that it was both. Like I say,
Yeah.
like there maybe the parody aspect does. I think it comes from this, like how I mentioned, like that it was so
Hmm.
small town vibes to
Right.
how crazy this world is, and I think specifically how crazy Frank is. But he and his squad are funny, and I think it's like it's funny that he's so tropey. He's so
Right.
he's like a drug lord or what, like it's
Right.
so in this world he has weird crazy friends, like
Hmm.
just every like there's
And
so
he
many
has
things about him.
Dean Stockwell's Ben, another weird friend who
Yes.
somehow seems like sedated, but also as threatening.
Yep.
And
Almost like cabaret like
yes,
really
he literally is like
strange.
MC from Cabaret.
Yeah, like and yeah, and that
Has a
he would
pipe hat. Yeah.
even befriend someone like that. I was like,
Right.
that's I don't know, that's kind of strange. Um, so he really is very hard to like. It's almost hard to believe until he's in the
Sure.
movie. But I agree that somehow like everybody is kind of believable in their roles. I suspend my
Right.
disbelief a lot is what I found for both Mulholland Drive and this this movie
Sure.
maybe a little more. But
Yeah.
it wasn't like inauthentic, I thought, or like such a
Yeah.
task. It like the scripts are so crazy like that, or just like you have to, you're kind of seeing it to believe it, I guess. But that's how I felt with Frank, and
Yeah.
I loved that aspect of it.
Well, apologies, folks, if I already said this in our Mulholland Drive episode, but David Foster Wallace, who almost I should clear, not even that big of a fan. If I were to just it's fine. But he wrote a lot about Lynch, and he one of the things he read was that people say that Lynch's characters don't sound like real people, but if you've been at a
Yeah.
LA bus stop at 2 a.m., you know that these are real people.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think that's, if not literally LA bus stop, just like, no, his people are real. They're just on the fringes of society. And sometimes
Yep.
that's not necessarily drug addict. That's just a stranger, weirder fringe.
Yep.
And I think that's true. So I think there's like a lot of grounding, as bizarre as they are, that
Yeah.
I think he is writing about people who he has observed or knows. Um,
Hmm.
I want to talk about the goons because the goons include other Lynch staples like Jack Nance, who's Paul, who for
Oh.
whatever reason, right after Kyle MacLachlan's punch, he just comes up and sames I'm Paul.
Oh yeah,
Is
yeah, right.
he's the lead in a he's been with Lynch since the beginning. He's the lead in Eraserhead and was
Okay.
in
Hmm.
kind of everything up until he died shortly after making Lost Highway. But like another guy that like you're gonna see in a Lynch movie. And
Hmm.
then the one who's wearing like almost a shark skin suit, but like it's two different silver things and a tie. That's
Uh-huh.
Brad Dourif. He's in One for the Cuckoo's Nest. He's been
Oh,
in
okay.
a lot of. He's still acting. He's great. So I do love that you have these character actors. And Dean Stockwell was a child actor, is still acting. I think even all the other weird guys are still someone who, like, if you watch several movies, you recognize, and
Uh-huh.
they're just getting to play in this really weird, strange
Yep.
guys being adjacent to this very bizarre drug world. I also think there's something generally more frightening to me about a small time criminal like this.
Hmm.
I think there's got to be an insecurity about being the big fish in a small pond, right? Of like
Hmm.
you're the scariest guy in Lumberton, but do you have a chip on your shoulder that you're not the scariest guy in
That's
like New York
fair.
City or something?
Mm.
I don't know. And maybe it's just because there's some of the movies that have them, they have these really unhinged characters. There's something kind of they're not smart enough to be the bigger thing. They're kind of dumb usually, and in a
It's
weird way that makes them more frightening to me.
That's such a great, like, it's almost like car salesman vibe versus like a mob,
Hmm.
like a member of the mob or
Right,
something.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like we'll probably eventually do an episode on Jackie Brown, but like Samuel Jackson's character in that is really frightening to me because he is a kind
Hmm.
of dumb, scary crook. But part of what's scary about him is he can't be reasoned with because he has a little bit of chip on his shoulder, and like that makes him more of a
Uh-huh.
threat. So I
Yeah.
think there is that element of Frank for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it makes me think even of the stakeout aspects that Jeffrey
sure,
does, but I laughed I laughed thinking about it. I laughed in the movie, maybe the
yeah,
hardest at that insane
the
camera that's
camera
in
he
a
makes.
shoebox that he pulls like
Yes,
that is wild. And it was in like a cardboard like he packed a cardboard.
yeah.
I don't I can almost can't that was absolutely wild and like so
It's an
funny.
unexpected thing. Yes.
Yes.
And it's like I know that like it's possible to make a camera like that. I don't know how to do it,
I
but
know. I
but
thought,
it
how
is
the
a
hell did this kid like rig that?
yes. Well, this kind of gets on a point of it is really hard to ignore the parallels between like any character Kyle MacLachlan plays in a David Lynch piece and David Lynch. Like they're both
Mm.
are from the Pacific Northwest broadly,
Mm-hmm.
and Lynch is very open about seeing a lot of parallels between them as well. So
Mm.
it's kind of the very broad scopes is he sees them as a stand. I think it's more complicated than that, but like
Yeah.
to that point, Lynch being also like a craftsman, it's like kind of like, yeah, and then your character just knows how to do this. you know,
Yeah, yeah. This is a skill that
like a
he,
kid would.
yep, that
um,
he obtained.
I think we've this is probably kind of in some areas. I also love a detective movie where the detective is not a professional in any
Yes,
sense.
that has to.
And they're
Mm-hmm.
making those rookie ass mistakes, and
Yeah.
they're definitely in over their head because they're so one that they're so connected on the viewers level of that again
Yeah.
voyeur thing of we want to solve a mystery,
Yep.
we want to be that one, and we are also unskilled.
Yeah.
We're not
Yeah.
Sam Spade,
It's
and
it's very good that like that it failed for them so quickly.
right,
Like it just quickly goes so south, like so wrong,
yeah,
and it's funny to think that they were going into it like Scooby Doo almost, and then
yes.
and and it just goes so wrong so
Well,
fast.
one of my favorite, like, why do you think this is a good idea things is when Jeffrey and I'm blanking on her character's name, but Lord Dern, or they're going back to the apartment to try
Yeah,
and sneak in.
Sandy.
Sandy, thank you.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, shouldn't I honk to give you a warning? And they somehow land on, I'll honk 4 times or 3
Yeah,
times, but like still like,
I thought the
n-
same.
that's less than a car alarm, right?
Yep.
It's such an unnatural amount. Like that's so weird.
And she's just gritting her
And
teeth the whole time, looking
right.
like so strangely at the person going. Like it was just a lot
Yeah.
of that is very
And
funny.
yeah, it's true. There's a lot of humor in this movie, and again, I think that's missed out if you're. This is a movie that kind of tells you we're going along for a ride, and
Uh-huh.
you kind of get on this level or you don't.
Yep.
Um, but even throughout the humor, I think because of the humor also too, it still does impact an emotional all up to me. And
Uh-huh.
this was maybe the strangest movie going experience I had was seeing this in a theater with a lot of other people. I saw this at Pacific Film Archive, and I'd already seen it dozens of times by then.
Mm-hmm.
But this, even more than Mulholland Drive, people were laughing and crying at opposing scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most oddly controversial scenes is the scenes where Sandy's describing her dream of the robins bringing love,
Yes. Yep.
and so there's a lot of takes on this, and basically uh, Jeffrey just asks Sandy, like, why is there badness in the world? She describes this kind of dream of robins bringing love. And it's a very cheesy thing, but a lot
Yes.
of people, and I want them to think Lynch actually means this. He knows it's funny and he knows people laugh at it. And in
Good.
one interview, he said it's maybe having them say those lines was worse than anything Isabella Rossellini had to do as Dorothy. But I think there's generally a case maybe that he actually does see the world that simply or summarize it of like, why are there bad people like this?
Mm.
And that's part of his kind of aw shucks thing. As weird of a guy and as dark of a guy he is
Yeah.
basically Jimmy Stewart. It's been described where he's this character's man whose whole life was stuck in the 50s
Yeah.
and would just create characters like Frank, but then also generally ask a simple question like why they're men like him and
Why are there bad
be
people?
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think it's one like no, like you can laugh at it and that's fine, but also think about it. And
True. Mm-hmm.
he is sincere, and that's when the complications of that's just something that sounds so stupid he means and kind of has a point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah. No, like I mean, I just was struck by how different of a movie this could be if Jeffrey was like, "Ooh,
oh
I
yeah,
like this world," or like,
yeah,
like
absolutely, this
he
is
gets
not a
sucked.
guy going and right, he doesn't become an addict to any of this.
He
He
doesn't.
he ultimately
He's
rejects it.
completely
Yeah,
repulsed the whole time,
right,
and as you
yeah,
should, because it is really insane. But still, it was
yeah,
like it could have been, and it was also I was trying to think of like it's been kind of fun for me to think of films anthropologically too in their
sure,
timeline of when and like
yeah,
so I was thinking of 80s and or like late 80s and we're getting into early like punk culture almost
sure,
of America
yeah,
and I was like I think I remember that there was a real like cynicism that started to bleed
yes,
into like 90s film and it's
hmm,
this almost feels like this is not it doesn't reach that and it's kind of
hmm,
I do appreciate it for that aspect because it could have it like it is the things that happen to him are so dark, obviously, but like
right,
it, it's not malicious or like something like
right,
so crazy, like so insane. It is very like tempered
yeah,
down into a moral and there are some films that happens and I'm not to like not that I loved the morale or like needed the moral aspect of this, but I think it just
sure.
works so so well in this film in particular.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's a weird kind of restore to order after going through this whole thing,
Yeah.
and um, I don't think maybe so. Basically, he does ultimately kind of turn all the information in, and
Yep.
there's a lot of crazies. That there's a long joyride scene where Frank kind of catches him and torments him for it's a pretty long. Often, this is where a lot of the darkly comic goon stuff comes in, where they're kind of tormenting him, and sometimes it's just dragging him around to weird places, and then
Hmm.
that is ultimately and repeatedly having people dance and lip sync to Roy Orbison's In Dreams, including Dean Stockwell doing this to a construction lamp, which one of my favorite scenes. It's great.
Hmm.
And I think a great thing about Frank is like you kind of you definitely get the sense that something horrible happened to him, but you don't really care. You're like, yeah, he
Oh
has
yeah,
some
yeah.
horrible arc. Like this man is clearly traumatized and has a lot of weird
Sure.
things, but then I don't care as a viewer. Like I don't feel bad for him. Like it's
Yeah.
there. And there's multiple moments of him just breaking down crying, and he is
I was
such
gonna
a kid, right? And
right.
like he swears like a kid, like he swears like a 12-year-old who just said fuck for the first time and now is adding it 6 times every sentence, even if it doesn't make sense.
That is so true. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Just crying, crying at like people singing, like just
Yeah.
can't handle anything. Like,
It's too much birthday. Yeah, he's
yeah.
he also there's a lot of language in this movie, but him and Dean Stockwell, who plays Ben, is the only other character who swears, and it's only when he says the toast is to fucking. And he says
Oh yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And he's doing the toast. Like that's the only other time,
yeah. Yep.
which always surprises me because like I just think of it as being such a foul language movie, but it's almost entirely just one guy.
Wow. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
either. Yeah.
Um,
That's funny.
which is an interesting way to go about it. But yeah, there's he's a interesting, such a foul, angry character who does. I think you can really make a case as in like Arrested Development, like this trapped in this adolescence, and is violent in that way.
Uh-huh.
And um, he's fascinating and fun to watch. But yeah, obviously, I don't want to understand him deeper. And
Yeah, you don't
the
need
movie doesn't
to.
ask me to. Yeah,
Right. And then oh gosh, it's like it was pretty like refreshing because I think nowadays a villain has to be there has to be a duality to a villain, and it's like
right, right,
you really don't have to have that.
right.
Like it's you kind of forget almost if you're
Yeah,
writing for anything, you're like you know, there can be straight villains and like it's
yes,
okay. Like the audience will accept that. And so it's just
absolutely.
there's such a different tone nowadays that it is really marked in this.
I think and I'm just reflecting, like you never have a you and I aren't so different type of monologue, but I think you also kind of have a clear duality of it's as a viewer, it's obvious that Jeffrey's aware of if I do go down this rabbit hole, that's what it looks like, and I don't want to do
Hmm.
that. If
Oh
I
yeah.
lean into this, and so I think it's a lot stronger by not having it. But it also, this was occasionally it's on YouTube since it's on the Criterion channel. There is like an hour of deleted scenes from Blue Velvet that if anybody's watching a
Mm.
screen, either working on a screenplay or making a movie, I really recommend trying to watch that because every scene in there sounds like a scene a studio told David Lynch he should shoot, and he was absolutely right to not include it in there. Like it seems like something. Oh, we need to understand this character more. We need to
Oh,
understand that, and they're all good. Like there's nothing necessarily wrong with them, but he was right to cut all of it down to what the movie is. There's some
wow.
really interesting stuff in there. It's just for me, the fan, fun, but it is really interesting to think about, like you said, of how handheld studios think audiences need to be
Yeah.
right now. Um, Going back to Netflix again, there's you might have already heard about this, but some executive was telling writers like you need to have character. I mean, it was also Paramount Plus. They were telling writers have your characters announce what they're doing like every few minutes.
Oh
So
my
for
God.
people who are cooking while they're watching,
Oh,
they can keep track. It's like that's just watch something else. Watch a show,
my
watch a comfort show you've seen before. Listen to
that
music,
is
do
my
something
number
else, right?
one pet peeve set. Like
Yes.
and it sounds absolutely insane. Also,
Yeah.
it's just wild. It's such a
Right.
wild thing to include. It's so funny.
It's so stupid and it's so demeaning to belittling to the audience. But there was nothing like it was like too nothing on that level with the stuff he cut
Uh-huh.
out. But there was like you have a lot more scenes establishing that Sandy's boyfriend kind of sucks. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and so it's like, all right, I can understand that being a student. I was like, we need to feel better about this guy stealing somebody else's girl,
yeah.
and you have some little more about Frank, like not anything that explains anything we're talking about, but like all seem like notes that don't actually add to the story.
I was gonna say, yeah, like it just kind of doesn't matter, and you don't
Right.
have to put a morality to the jock boyfriend. You know, like
Mhm.
it just does.
Right.
It's such a, it's nice and concise in that way, I
Yeah.
guess.
Other than the Jack boyfriend. So after he's kind of had after Jeffrey's, I think we should talk about this plot wise, had his moment of he's cried, he's been beaten up by Frank and the goons, he's been abandoned. And he's turned in all the evidence. He's washing his hands of this, and he's going to take Sandy to the dance. And they have again very the most 50s 80s like they're going to the 50s dance, but the music is synth. It's Julie
Yeah.
Christie, who also
Yep.
is another big bunch collaborator. But then on the way home, maybe the most 50s thing that happens is they're being chased, and he has good
Uh-huh.
reason. It's a frightening scene because at first he generally thinks this is Frank and be much more dangerous people after they get them. But no, it's just the boyfriend and his shitty friends,
Yeah.
which is still a threat. But again, it's the most classic high school 50s movie, which was a
So true.
genre, but by the way, like that was a big genre of like the teen it's in
Oh
trouble.
yeah.
um, it seems like one of those, and they are about like they said, come out of the car, we're gonna beat up, and then Dorothy comes out of nowhere, naked
Yes.
and beaten, and that is the thing that really happened to David Lynch. Him and his brother were just going home one day. He was like 9 or 10, and they did just come across a woman who was clearly beaten and like
Oh
that, and
my
they
God.
caught parents, called the police, and something that was like it was never explained to him what happened, never asked again, but stuck with him. So,
Yeah.
um, which I just know because again, there are very few autobiographical things he's open about. That's one of the rare kind of things into his psyche that we get, and
Mm.
and that's one of the most Lynchian scenes in terms of the mood changes so many times so quickly,
Yeah.
and it's a thing that I think a lot of younger directors maybe got credit for, like, and we've talked about Tarantino, and Tarantino can do that, and a lot of other
Uh-huh.
directors have. The same with needle drops, obviously, but like so many things that I think Tarantino gets credit for are done better in Blue Velvet, and
Mm.
they don't get
Mm-hmm.
compared that often, but like the use of Roy Orbison's and Dreams and things like that,
Yeah.
and this intense mood shift happening back and forth like 3 times
Oh, that's cool.
is, I think, much more effective than I think Tarantino ever did. So,
Wow.
and he was a big fan of Punch, so it's not like an unfounded comparison here.
Yeah.
Even like I don't remember the song that's kind of playing at the end. There's like another 50s kind of ballad playing when Jeffrey Belmont comes across the crime scene where you have the man who's been shot who's still standing, and all this the most bizarre, creepiest
Yep.
tableau. But like that song is kind of ironic because you have that over like a police shootout, but also he's in a depressed mood and it works. It's not a
Yeah.
strictly ironic point.
Yeah.
And no,
Yeah.
that's just I think as Tarantino becomes more of a cranky old man complaining about things, I've been losing. So I'm going to see whatever his last movie is, but
Uh-huh.
thinking about like the people who are not as disgusted that he's ripped off. Everyone kind of points to
Right.
Scorsese and John Ford, etc. And
Right.
I still enjoy his movies, but like these connections are just drawing my attention to this time.
I was gonna say I thought it did remind me of Pulp Fiction
Yeah.
in some ways, and it does it. I guess it is tonally, but it's hard to pinpoint. I mean, Pulp
Well,
Fiction
you also
reminded me
have
of
like
like
a 50s and 70s thing of like this movie doesn't really seem like it's in the decade it's actually
that
in.
that might be it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's you're right that there are kind of a lot of nods.
Yeah.
But I know it came after, so and
Yeah.
pretty fairly shortly after, but it's like there had to be there's influence there
Yeah,
that you can
absolutely.
see. Yeah.
And um there's obviously other things there too, but like so many other filmmakers who do, some of these classic things that I think Lynch just did so well in this movie. Also, I don't know what something about this movie just always looks so beautiful to me. Like the print, the cinematography always looks so good.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
we haven't talked about set design so much because I
I
Lynch is
know.
also so fun at doing the most like lived in tacky
Yeah.
domestics. like this probably is somebody's home. And then you have
I know.
Dorothy's apartment, which looks really insane with just like mauve and black and like the hallways like charcoal.
Yeah.
But how did that work for you as someone we often talk about interiors and houses? Was it of note to you as well in this movie?
Oh, of course. And I'm glad you mentioned that this is small budget. I think before I'm sure I talked about like
Sure.
because Mulholland Drive was small budget as well from what I remember.
Small but bigger. Yeah, he had a
Small but
more
bigger.
sweet. Yeah,
It's good to note. But this, I mean, if this was smaller, this does not feel smaller than Mulholland Drive in terms of budget and like
mm,
it doesn't feel small budget. That's to say that there's so many sets. There's so many like obviously real
right.
sets. They I'll say it, they just don't make movies like this. They really don't. And nothing
It's
like
true.
nothing looks like this at all these days.
No.
It doesn't matter what you're filming. They could be it could be an exact replica of this. It just doesn't look like how this looks.
Yeah.
So fully agree. So many diverse sets too. I think like
Right.
Indie is very, very, very tiny these days, and like we'll have
Mm,
you'll be in a house or you'll be in,
right.
the woods or something like that. And
Yeah.
so to have so many sets and color and like
Right.
we said, like postmodernism aspects to it,
Yeah.
that also kind of throw you for a loop of in terms of timeline, I guess, but
Hmm.
are really pulling a lot. Um, it just,
Yeah.
that diversity in terms of like visuals, I think is very lost typically.
I think you're right. It's because like I and Lynch was always very involved in building the sets. I mean, he worked with the same set designer a lot. It's Frank Red Elms. I could be missing that one, but like the guy just worked on Martin Scorsese's last movie.
Okay.
Uh, he's still a professional doing that.
Yeah.
God, am I blanking on that?
Is it Irishman? No.
No, Killing of the Flower Moon. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so like a man who's still very professional though, but like Lynch is also like on every movie. Like there's photos of him building the sets and building the props and being involved. And like there's the kind of blinking on this scene where you have the shadows of like factories, kind of
Oh,
going
yeah, yeah.
behind. He wasn't happy with whatever was happening, so he just found some scraps and put that together himself in 15 minutes. And the set designer talked about like I didn't know how he knew how to do that, but like he just
Yeah.
rigged something to have the shadow to do that.
Nice.
And we haven't mentioned this episode, but like he was a studio art professional before going
Mm,
into film, and like so and did a lot of painting and did paintings till he died, but also did these kind of multi media things. So had a really practical understanding of how to do a lot of
nice.
things, which really pays off. But like it's dark, it's jarring in a Lynch movie when the interior is really bare, like it's some of the Mulholland Drive houses or something, because it's
Mm-hmm.
always so intentional. Like you have maybe like the sleeker hip mansion, just right,
Mm-hmm.
like that. But then some of the houses have like so much not clutter, but like so much stuff that looks more than a professional movie would normally have, but also look like
Yeah.
a person actually lives there.
Yep.
And I love that. And it's always weird, odd things, but like, yeah, this is what a house looks like.
Yeah.
you know
No, it's true.
and I feel like there's kind of a love for that I feel come from. I think he's not like these assholes live like this. It's like no, this is what a house looks like to me. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or what these characters' houses look
right,
like
right.
in particular, which is
Yeah,
yeah, it's a part of the characterization as well. Like very much
yeah,
so. And I think that could be like chalked up to today to now it just looks it'll film good or like it'll film correctly or it won't blow out
yeah.
my brightness or something like that. Like so
Right.
I love that it's drenched in color and just so much texture, all of that.
There's so much lore around this movie, so much like stories that I don't want to really get too much into, but
Oh,
it's a fun movie to look up. I was one kind of famous classic anecdote is there have been pilgrimages and a shrine built at the Bob's Big Boy in LA, one in particular, because David Lynch loved that restaurant. I would have all his business meetings there.
wow.
And so this is a thing that's happening right now, and the story has been told of Tom McLaughlin and Laura Dern as well as Bruce Leaney are having lunch with David Lynch, and Frank has not been cast yet. And then people know to call David Lynch at the Bob's Big Boy. And they
Oh my
call
god.
and it's phones for you, David. It's Dennis Hopper, and Dennis Hopper is crazy. It's like I just read the part for Frank. I have to play Frank because I am Frank,
Oh
and
wow.
kind of cast him from
Frightening.
that. But then told the rest of the table like, yeah, so we cast Dennis, but the bad news is I don't know if we ever want to get lunch with him because he said he's Frank.
I was gonna say frightening, scary.
Yeah,
I
just like
would be terrified.
announcing to everybody like I'm not going to make you have lunch with Dennis Hopper because that was weird,
Yeah.
but we're going to work with
Let's
him.
we're gonna separate him from the cast.
Yeah, a good who I should clarify, a man who had his issues, Dennis Hopper, I mean, and
Mm,
I'm not going to really endorse. I like him as an actor in several things, but I'm not going to defend
sure.
Dennis Hopper and some of the stranger things he did, um,
Sure.
including saying I'm Frank Boot. But I think he's great in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you going on this ride, Megan. This is definitely a strange movie. I think it's a more challenging movie than Mulholland Drive in a very literal sense of like there is more assault and strange sexual violence in this movie. So
Mhm.
it's not for the faint of heart, but I also do think it's not wanton. I think it's not frivolous.
Hmm.
And I don't think we're gonna get anybody like David Lynch anytime soon. And just knowing this movie's influenced so many people, and it sounds hard to say, but it's touched so many people. I'm really glad to share it with you. So thank you
Oh.
for doing this. This was a last minute change, folks. I want to also thank Maker for being such a great podcast partner. We were not going to do this until a few
Oh.
days before we did. So
Well, it's fun, and it's such a it's so like important too to
yeah,
cover the best of these really amazing directors that we're not, like you say, we're really not gonna get again. Um I did really enjoy it, and I think that like I think for me like I didn't, or I noted that like editing wasn't my favorite on this in
sure.
some instances. And that I thought
Was the ear too
Mulholland,
much for you? The
not not particularly, like I think that I also think some of the camera movement is like funny. I think there were just some
sure.
like swings and misses almost with like those
That's fair.
more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
artistic shots. Like I think
Yeah.
there was like a probably with one of the a little bit of the Goon Squad. I think it was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
them on frame, and then they cut immediately, like they're not in frame anymore, of like them
Yes.
running away, and it just was like it was
Just like the
jarring and
smoke when
like
he's screaming,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like jarring, and like it took you out of like it looked like an attempt, very much like an attempt from like an editor, which was kind of
That's
funny.
fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I just noticed some like weirder things like that.
Hmm.
But what a like it I think what I really got from it was like this element of what a clear voice David Lynch
Hmm.
has, and I actually really want to rewatch Twin Peaks from being reminded of like what I do like
Yeah.
about.
Did you just watch the whole show or just like a couple episodes for
We
college?
watched like a pretty good chunk, like maybe like 3 episodes, where
Okay.
maybe like the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And it was, from what I remember, it had the vibes that we have been like
Yeah,
touting in talking about him, and
absolutely.
so I'm excited to revisit that, and yeah, very special, very you can feel that like you, I think you said it well, that it's going to be hard to find someone like this, and if we do, it'll probably be he'll be influenced by David Lynch, so
Right. Of
we can
course. That's
specify
true.
that. Yeah.
Right. But I do have to give the warning if you're going through Twin Peaks for the first time. Like, why I love it. There's like a notable chunk of episodes in the second season where um it seems like the show's lost its way because it has, and they're like in the middle of being canceled and they're trying to figure some stuff out. But then
Oh
the
no.
ending of original season two, and Lynch was off shooting something else. I think he was shooting Wild at Heart. So the ending
Yeah.
of season two, though, the original run is fantastic. And then eventually, I would love to actually talk about the movie Firewalk. It's his maybe most controversial thing, but I love it, and
Mm.
it's something that has, I think, been it's something that has been like more critically acclaimed in the last like decades following it came out, where everyone's like, "What the hell is this?" Mostly because they expected a sequel and it's more of a prequel.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Yeah, yeah.
and then the third season, he wrote and directed and co-wrote, sorry, and directed every episode. So it's pure
Hmm.
Lynch and Frost. So I'm a big fan
Wow.
of all of it, but I, as on the podcast, maybe give warning, like you're gonna hit a point in season two where you think, "What the hell's happening?" In the other way, not in like the I'm intrigued, but in the like,
Mm.
"What the hell happened to my favorite show?" Stick with it.
That's funny.
So,
That's a
um,
good, very loving endorsement. I'm here for the vibes,
yes,
so that's
yeah,
fine.
exactly. The vibes are there the whole time, so you're fine. And there's
Great.
so many other eccentric, fun characters in the show. Um,
Awesome.
so on that note, I think I think I've said my piece on this, folk. I hope you watch it. I hope you will see in David Lynch. If you've heard this guy forever, you never gave one of his movies a chance. Yeah, I hope you do.
Hmm.
Um, I think we're good for our recommendations. Sound good, Megan?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to go first, or
Sure. I do have one. I have
all
a
right?
to. I feel like David Lynch is so nostalgic, and I'm going to actually throw us to a new movie that
Oh, okay, fun.
came out, which I'm excited to tell Seth about because we're horror fans here on Film
Hmm.
Optimist, very much so. And we saw a really good January horror release, which I like premise that January is typically I
Yeah.
know it, and like I'm sure a lot of people do, as you throw out the worst crap in January that you hope nobody will see.
Right,
And
right.
I was so glad to see Wolfman in theaters.
Okay.
It
Nice.
was good. Yeah, it was a film by, I'm trying to get the director was Lee Wannell, who did
Okay.
other horror projects. Like he did Insidious, which was really
Oh, sure, yeah.
he also did that's right. I was pulling up his information here, but he did The Invisible Man, which I had talked about before,
Right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
in 2022, which I really
The
enjoyed
new,
and was kind
yeah,
of
with Elizabeth Olsen, right?
that's right. And like
Yeah.
a different vibes for a horror movie, but
Hmm.
I tout Wolfman because of its practical effects,
Mm.
the whole situation. I mean, it's pretty like clear in the trailer that of what happens basically of a dad
Yeah.
taking his like wife and daughter to a trip to kind of reconnect with his roots in Oregon, but then quickly gets turns into a wolf man of like legend because
Mhm.
of their situation. That's not really a spoiler. It gets revealed in the trailer, which is kind of
Sure.
um but shocking that that's kind of like a big part of it, but there's so much more that
Mm.
like spins
Okay.
in it, and the makeup was really really good and really effective. I enjoyed it. I think that like it was it was like shockingly effective, I would say. So do
Mm.
recommend it for that. It was a great January film release.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you're right. January's I should have sent you a photo. I recently won free tickets to movies. Um,
Yeah.
Shout out to the Milwaukee Admirals. I went to a game for the first time in my life and somehow ended up doing a movie
Woo.
trivia thing. And I won. Okay, I have to sorry, I have to tell this quick. The question was
Please
phrased so
do.
weirdly though, because it was what Green Goblin Wisconsin native is the lead actor in Nosferatu, the new one. I should have known
Oh.
with Green Goblin. I should have known with Wisconsin native, but like I was thinking lead actor Nosferatu, and like, and I was blanking on like I said Nicholas Hoult at first because and they I could tell like all right, well that is the lead actor kind of in that
Mm.
movie. So they gave me a second guess, like oh you mean Willem Dafoe because I think they
Uh-huh.
realized the question was phrased awkwardly, and he's definitely not the lead actor in that movie.
Yeah, no.
He's in that movie, but bottom line is I sometimes went for free tickets. Thank you, Mark Yaddles. Thank you, Marcus Theaters. But
Oh.
then I'm checking the theater, like what I want to see. It's like, oh, the movie I want to see is Mickey 17 coming out in March, the new Bong Joon-ho movie.
Okay. Oh
And
yeah,
Robert
yeah, yeah.
Pattinson. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not seeing another thing until then. That is like gotta get to the theater for that. So these
It's
tickets
true.
might sit around for a while. um, I
That's
hope they
fine if
don't
it does.
expire. I'm gonna check, but
Right.
yeah, except for some of the like Oscar stuff being re-released.
Yeah.
Which sorry, gotta note this real quick too. I haven't seen the Burger List. Heard it's good, but there's the AI controversy there where they
Mm.
not only used AI to generate some of the images of the architecture, much worse, they used it to modify the voices of the actors when speaking Hungarian,
Mm.
including like the lead actor, like Adrian Brody's voice was modified with an
Wow.
AI, and I think he was just nominated for Best Actor. But I could be wrong with that, but a
Ooh.
bizarre choice. I don't know if he was
Interesting.
aware that it happened or not, but this went from being like such a Oscar contender movie to an AI controversy that I think is very grounded. Because like, what? How do you nominate somebody for an AI for an Oscar if you're not hearing their voice?
Wow. Interesting
And
times, folks.
yeah, and maybe it's a really small portion of the movie. In which case, why did you fuck up the whole movie by doing that?
Yeah, for real.
I'd
Wow.
rather. I know there was jokes about anybody who spoke Dutch know that Cillian Murphy was not speaking Dutch in his scenes where he's supposed to be, and
Mm.
Oppenheimer really sees doing to a native speaker poorly. But I'd rather you have that than you have a computer fuck it all up. So
Yeah, really. Or
yeah,
just kind of fake it? I don't know. That
yeah,
that's hard.
it's so
That was
weird.
so
Yeah.
hard.
Um, but yeah, sorry. Go move on to my recommendation. I rather than recommend another Lynch movie, I want to recommend one of his favorite movies,
Oh, I
and
like
this
that.
is the Federico Fellini movie La Strada. Fellini was actually born the same day of the month as Lynch, and they did get to meet before Fellini died. But one of his biggest
Wow.
influences, the Italian surrealist, and La Strada stars Federico Fellini's wife, who's an actress in several movies. Julieta Messina, who this is the first
Mm.
movie she starred in, directed by her husband, and Anthony Quinn. And it follows. This is one of those movies that is kind of similar to Blue Velvet, and like it feels very surreal, but also unlike later, more extremely surreal Fellini movies, everything kind of happens. It's just weird, where he has those full-on dream sequences in movies, and it's a woman becomes the assistant to a strong man who
Mm.
kind of travels around the town and countryside doing his kind of circus routine, and um, he's not great. They kind of fall in love, kind of don't,
Mhm.
and you have a lot of circus type of things, and it's like this dynamic seems to be prearranged. There's a lot of unanswered questions. It's really weird,
Uh-huh.
but it's a beautiful movie, and you just feel so much for this character who just kind of is uprooted from her life by very, very handsome Anthony Mann, but also drunk, mean Anthony. Sorry, Anthony Quinn. Um, it's a really beautiful movie, and it goes some places I didn't expect. I really love it, and it's one of Lynch's favorite movies. And I think you can see a lot of that his later work or his work in this movie. So, I also think you'd like to know people are watching his favorite movies. So check out. There's lists
Yeah,
going around everywhere, folks. So look for those. But
I know.
check
I was
that
gonna
out.
say I just saw The Wizard of Oz listed as one, which I can
Oh, of
believe.
course. Well,
Sunset
Dorothy is
Boulevard.
literally that's why the character is Dorothy. And
Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
I mean, that's that's a little bit of low hanging fruit, I think.
there's a
I think
there's a whole that's true. There's
Wizard
a
of
whole
Oz is pretty
documentary called
probably everybody's favorite.
Lynch slash Oz that is like it's multiple different filmmakers talking about their take on the influence of Wizard of Oz on Lynch,
Yeah.
etc. And I'll say a lot of it is kind of mid, but John Waters is a significant section of this, and they were actually friends and they met several times, and like it's
Oh,
worth watching the
cool.
whole movie just for that, or if you can find that segment. But
Yeah.
you kind of have a very new following of like famous directors who you're interested in and people you've never heard of who are maybe wrong.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, I
um,
like that. I'm all
yeah,
about that.
right. But no, Wizard of Oz was a huge influence on Lynch, and it comes out like
Oh.
literally the Good Witch of the West shows up as a character in Wild at Heart. So,
Oh wow.
yeah,
That's very so sweet. I like that.
yes. All right, folks. Well, thank you for bearing with us a slightly grimmer episode in terms of where I'm at morale and not as optimist. I appreciate it. And Megan, always great to talk to you and talk film. Yeah.
Great to talk to you, Seth. Well, we're forever optimists, but
Yes.
we feel your pain and thank you for speaking so beautifully about David Lynch. Really nice.
Thank you. All right, folks. I will at least be more upbeat next time.
Yeah, we're gonna go over our top watches of 2024, so stay
Yes.
tuned.
Stay tuned.